In this video, we're going to take a look at the puppet warp command inside of Photoshop. Now, to really show this off, I'm going to create a brand new layer, and we're going to paint something in the middle of it. So, let's see, bear with me for just a sec. Let's create a little stick figure. So, give him a head, and a simple body, and some legs. Now, it's important that even though I'm drawing this kind of sloppily, to show off puppet warp without there being any strange things going on, you need to make sure that all of the pixels of the stick figure are contiguous, that you don't have something like this, like a gap in between the arm and the body. Actually, let me clean that shoulder up just a little bit. And as I mentioned, we don't want any gaps, so I'll go ahead and close that off. Pull the other shoulder out, make another arm, and another hand, and there we go. And close off this little gap here. Okay, now what Puppet Warp is going to do is create a mesh around the pixels of your layer and allow you to reshape that mesh by dropping down some control points. If you are a Maya 3D person, or really from any other 3D animation package, you have probably seen similar behaviors from a variety of polygon deformers. Now, if you're not a 3D person and you have no idea what any of that means, do not stress. This is actually pretty simple. So let's go under Edit and jump down to Puppet Warp. And our options bar changes. I'll go over what's going on in the options bar here in just a minute. The first thing I want to focus on is the Show Mesh toggle. Let's go ahead and turn that on. And this shows you the polygon mesh which was just drawn around all of our pixels. Now let's take a look at a few things here inside our options bar. First off, we have a mode for the way in which this is going to deform. This will become more important in a minute, but we have rigid, we have normal, and distort. Basically, this is a minimal amount of distortion, a little bit of distortion, and then a high amount, a crazy amount of distortion, as you'll see here in just a little bit. We have density. This allows us to change the number of points in our mesh, but to really show that off, I want to play with expansion. Expansion gives you a distance for how far out you want the vertices of this polygon mesh to be created. So we'll drag these out a little bit, and I can take density and set it to fewer points, and you see the mesh is very simple, or I can set it to more points and the mesh is very dense. I'll go ahead and just leave it at normal for now. Of course, we can turn the mesh on and off, and this pin stuff isn't going to make any sense to us until we start dropping some pins, and this is where the Puppet Warp tool really comes to life. I'm going to start off by creating a pin right in between the shoulders, so right at the center of the chest. We'll make one right about the belly, one at the pelvis. We'll make one for each of the knees, we'll make one for each of the ankles, and then we'll put one at the shoulders, one at each of the elbows, and then one at each of the wrists. For the head, we'll just stick one up here right in the center of the head. Now, we can use these pins to reshape this mesh, and again, just throw this out there. If you are a 3D person, this is not entirely unlike rigging in a way, because now we can take, say, the elbow, and we can pull it up here, pull the hand up here, maybe pull the shoulder up a little higher, pull this shoulder down, and put the hand over here on the hip, stick the elbow out a little, and we can completely repose this character very quickly and easily. Now, if while I'm working, I click and hold down the mouse, I can, hang on, let me not do what I just did there. If I put my mouse right over the edge of this object and right at the outside, hold down the Alt key, you'll notice we get this little rotation tool. Now again, that's with rotate. I'm sorry, that's with the Alt key. So if I hold down Alt, you see I get this little rotation circle, so I can spin the foot around if I need to, or I can come up here and do the same thing. And if I select this point just by clicking on it first, I can rotate the hand around. Now it's important to keep that in mind, but also just be careful. If you hold down the Alt key and you have a point selected, you can also get this little pair of scissors, and this will remove a point. So you may not necessarily want to do that. Now with that done, let's take a look at some of our other options that we saw earlier. We had rigid, normal, and distort. Rigid is going to give us the least amount of actual change, like how flexible our mesh is. Normal is going to give us a little more flexibility, and distort will actually give us some kind of crazy behavior. You see, as we start to stretch things out, we can get some huge scaling, which is useful in some instances, but not so useful here when we're kind of reshaping something like a character. Now, we also have these controls for pin depth, and what these are for is to help you out if you have two pins that are right on top of one another. Let me go ahead and set this back over to normal so we're not scaling our character. But if I put one pin right on top of another, you'll notice in this case, if I try to click again, I'm actually getting that pin that was directly underneath. And that's because each of these pins has a priority. So if I take that pin that is kind of getting in my way, which is actually underneath it all, and I push that pin down, I can click this as many times as I want. I'm kind of deprioritizing that pin. So now if I click again, and really I guess I gotta go down further, so let's just keep pushing that down. Well, it's not wanting to grab exactly the one that I want. Unfortunately, at this time, there's no indication of how far up or down that pin is being pushed, but the whole point of that operation is just to make it a little easier to select pins that get right on top of one another. Now, you can right-click on a pin, and you can reset its depth, or you can push it forward and backward, as you saw there. You can also hit H to hide your pins, so I'm just holding down the H key and all those disappear. We can hide our mesh away if we want to, and then all we see is just moving the stick figure around, which is pretty cool. We can select all of our pins at once by right-clicking and just choose Select All Pins. You are also not limited to selecting one pin at a time, obviously, but you can hold down Shift and select more than one at once and move those around like so. Of course, when you're happy, you can just press Enter, and there you go. So now you've completely reshaped your character. So if I hit Control Z a couple times, you can see where we started and where we ended up. So that is a rundown of the Puppet Warp tool. Again, really the whole idea is it creates this polygon mesh around the pixels of your layer and allows you to use some controls to some pins to reshape that mesh. There's one more thing I want to kind of bring up. Let me go ahead and bring the tool back up because I did fail to take a look at this. You do have a rotate area down here at the far end of your control bar. So let me re-rig our character, and you can see once you get the hang of it, this goes very, very quickly. Now, if I was to grab, actually, let me take care of this pin here at the wrist. Say we don't want to use that. Right here, if I grab this guy, he has two different rotate modes. He has auto and fixed. If I leave it at auto and I start to move this around, take a look at what the hand is doing. The hand is automatically rotating around based on the angle from our selected pin to its original pin. If I switch that over to fixed and I move around, you can see the difference. Now we can change that angle of rotation manually. I could say set that to 50 and you can see it rotates around. Or as you saw earlier, you can just hold down the Alt key and get right outside a pin and you can rotate that on your own. I just wanted to point that out and make sure you understood what those two rotate modes were for. So auto, once again, is going to kind of automatically rotate everything out beyond the edge of the pin, where fixed is going to hold that in place and you have to rotate it yourself. So that wraps up this discussion of the Puppet Warp tool as well as this video. Thanks for watching.